Nick and Helena, how are you?
I'm great. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Hey, thanks so much for taking my call. I really, really admire what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think it's kind of serendipitous, actually, that y'all are taking my call right after the last caller because I think it piggybacks really nicely off of what he was
Which is exactly why I took
saying,
it.
he claims. So it's not serendipity.
Well, it's fortuitous that you called today. So go ahead.
Very good. I think that sometimes theists, like the last caller, mistakenly think that atheism requires a belief that the universe came from nothing. And I think there are sort of 2 points that I would use to refute that, or at least to talk about it. One is that I'm an atheist and I don't make a claim that the universe came from nothing. And the second thing is I think that we may someday soon, if the research on the nature of nothing advances quickly enough, actually be able to make a claim about how the universe might have come from nothing if we really understand what that means. I'd love to get your thoughts on those two things.
You'd probably be better off getting Lawrence Krauss's thoughts on it. Lawrence, I had a brief conversation with him when we were in Kamloops, because there's still this issue of something I brought up today at the talk about people using the same word to mean two different things. We've seen it kind of with skepticism, we've seen it with atheism, and in philosophical circles and scientific circles, we're seeing it with nothing.
Also known as the equivocation fallacy.
Yeah, and so what philosophers mean by nothing and what physicists mean by nothing, those two are not necessarily equivalent. I think you're right that we are going to be getting to a point where we have a much better understanding, if such an understanding is possible. And you're also right that theists are often seem to be confused that if you're an atheist, you must believe X. Well, atheists and atheism only address the question or the issue of whether or not a God exists. And so
and I think
it's entirely
that's the important
possible
thing in terms of refuting the cosmological argument, because I hear so many times people, atheists trying to refute the cosmological argument saying, I don't necessarily accept the premise that the absence of God means the universe came into being from nothing, instead of saying, I'm sorry, losing my train of thought. Instead of saying that a state of absolute nothingness is not necessarily whatever need have existed.
Yeah,
like
I'm actually with Tracy on nothingness, and also I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Clifton, who posts on YouTube his theoretical bullshit. He has a slightly different take on it, where that nothing is not the sort of thing. It's not a thing. And you couldn't act upon it. So even this idea that there was a God who created the universe from nothing, that is a philosophical impossibility, because God would have to be acting on nothing, and nothing isn't a thing that you can act on, And so there's a bunch of different confusion around here about this, and the nuts and bolts of it is actually pretty simple, and that is there's a limit to what we can know currently about the origins of the universe. We have a model, a Big Bang cosmology, that provides the best current description, that maps accurately with the data that has been submitted to peer review, that makes predictions about things that we would discover, like cosmic microwave background radiation. Those new, the data that we discover from investigation maps to that model. This continues as other people investigate it. Either the data conforms to that model or it doesn't. And if it does, then that builds up more and more support for that particular model. And if it doesn't, then we begin to investigate and we can correct that model. And so all of this, and this kind of goes back to Corey's just wild assertion that he knows, all of this is the process that is science, that helps us not make a claim that X is true, but to demonstrate the best model that fits the observations and how productive they are.
And how do we convince people then who make a claim that the philosophical idea of nothing or the philosophical state of nothing can't have existed? How do we convince people that that state is either an impossibility or is not being claimed by anyone? Because that seems to be a catching point so many times, that they can't comprehend the idea that just because they can think of nothing, that it actually is any sort of physical possibility.
I'm not sure that I would try. I think rather than trying to convince somebody that something's impossible, sometimes it just pays to be kind of bullheaded. So when they say you're an atheist, you must believe that the universe came from nothing, I would just say, no, I don't. Why?
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you could continue repeating that because they're making an assertion without any evidence. And I think that if you want to move the conversation in a productive direction, I wouldn't try to bog people down with philosophical mumbo jumbo when they're the kind of people who don't get it.
Yeah, it's one of those things where also, and at this point, Nick, I'm going to go ahead and let you go, but I appreciate the call.
Great. Well, thank you guys both so much.
Thanks. You were talking before, Russell, about the were you there? You mentioned it
Right,
briefly.
yeah,
There was an
10 a.m.
amusing email that we got, which, and I'm not going to advocate for this as an actual response, but I did enjoy it, which is the next time one of these creationists or somebody asks, were you there? You should just say, yes. Mm-hmm. And if you weren't there, you can't possibly prove that I wasn't. So, I mean, if you're just going to cite nonsensical authorities like the Bible, well, what's to stop me from doing the same thing? Of course I was there when the universe was formed. Prove me wrong.
Right.
It kind of puts, it's not the sort of thing I'd ever do in a public debate as anything other than a joke. But it was amusing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a stupid question. And, that is an appropriately stupid answer.